Hello everyone, welcome back to the music lesson. It's going to be a little different this week. The last couple of weeks Daniel and I have been focused primarily on rhythm, and one of our viewers has written in to ask how to recognize the difference between the different time signatures with her ears, between 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 6/8, etc. So I think the best thing to do is start by just describing what all these numbers mean. Okay, it works like this. The upper number is how many beats in a bar or measure, and the bottom number is the type of note that gets one beat. Now the bottom number is almost always a 4 or an 8. If it's a 4, that means that a quarter note gets one beat. And if it's an 8, that means an eighth note gets one beat. You have lots of other numbers. It could be 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, etc. But for us, for right now, it's generally going to be a 4 or an 8. The upper number has more variables, as you can have any number of beats in a measure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and on and on and on. But the most common are 2, 3, 4, and 6. And that's really going to cover the majority of all the music you will ever hear, except for the theme to Mission Impossible. So let's start with the most commonly used of all the time signatures, 4/4. In fact, it's so common it's called common time. Since the bottom number is a 4, we know that each beat equals a quarter note, and there are 4 beats in each measure, therefore there's 4 quarter notes in a bar. Let's listen to an example of something in 4/4.
Every breath you take, and every move you make.
First of all, there is no one rule fits all for finding what the meter to a song is. It is somewhat subjective. The things I listen to the most are the drum pattern, the bass motion, and the changes in harmony. So how can you recognize 4/4? 4/4, well, it is the most common of all the songs, and most of the songs that you know are in 4/4. So listen to this.
Every breath you take, and every move.
Okay, so there's a bass drum and a snare drum. Bass drum, snare drum. And they're going back and forth, back and forth. Generally speaking, the bass drum is on beats 1 and 3, and the snare is on 2 and 4. There's the beats, 1 and 3 in the bass drum, 2 and 4 are on the snare drum. So the question is, which is 1 and which is 3? Which is 2, which is 4? And that's where the harmony and bass lines come in. Now the bass is usually strongest on beat 1, and the chords generally change in the beat. And when you hear the chord change, you can assume that is a beat 1 of a measure. The next most common time signature in popular music is 6/8. That means there's 6 beats in every bar, and the eighth note is equal to 1 beat. It sounds like this.
Darling, just hold my hand, be my girl, be your man. I see my
Anyway, let's look a little deeper into how 6/8 is formulated. What defines 6/8 is that 6/8 is divided into 2 groups of 3. So even though there's 6 beats in a measure, it feels kind of like there's two groups of 3 beats. So the drums still have that alternating bass drum, snare drum, bass drum, snare drum, like in 4/4, but the subdivision is in 3. So it's like the listener can feel a sort of a slow swaying or rocking back and forth with the bass drum, snare drum, and the cymbal generally is going to be playing on all 6 beats. Boom, 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 ka, 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 boom, 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 ka, 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 boom, 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 ka. Now, other things are similar to 4/4, and in fact, it's similar to almost all time signatures. The bass is playing heaviest on the beat 1, and the chord changes are generally on the beat 1 as well. So, listen to this. Listen to the bass drum and snare drum. It swings back and forth with the bass drum on 1, the snare on beat 4. Also listen to this. You hear the piano? It's playing in all 6 beats. And the chords are changing every 2 bars. That's kind of the 6/8 feel. It's sort of a nice swing back and forth. Personally, I love 6/8. I think it's more groovy, much more groovy than 3/4. But of course, this is a very subjective description. Now the next signature is 3/4. And this is where deciding in the time signature becomes a bit more subjective, because 3/4 has 3 beats, and each beat is worth a quarter note. That means in a measure of 3/4, there are 6/8 notes. In a measure of 6/8, there's also 6/8 notes. The difference is the feel. 3/4 has more of a bouncy feel, and it has upbeats on beats 2, beats 3. It's mostly associated with the waltz. Here's the classic waltz sound. It used to be used in popular music, but not really much the last 20, 30 years. When songs are written in a 3 feel now, it's almost entirely in 6/8. This is an older song, but it is in 3/4. Listen to this.
What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just...
And the reason I say it's in 3/4 is that the snare is playing on beat 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This wouldn't happen in 6/8. And the chords are changing on every measure, so every 3 beats.
Needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing.
In 6/8, the chords would not really change at that pace. So how do you tell the difference between 3/4 and 6/8, considering that they are so similar in many ways? Let's start with this. It's just eighth notes. So it could be 1 and 2 and 3 and, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now listen when I add the bass drum and snare drum. This is 3/4. Now the eighth notes again. And here's 6/8. Even though the eighth note is the same, the feeling is very different. The 3/4 is often confused with 6/8 because of the 3-beat feel. But 3/4, it's a waltz.
I was dancing with my darling to the Tennessee.
Okay, the last of the common meters, although it's really not used much anymore at all, is 2/4. 2 beats in a measure, the quarter note gets 1 beat. Therefore, a measure has 2 quarter notes. Generally, it sort of has a brisk, it moves along fairly quickly, the chord changes come faster, and there's often an upbeat feel. It's quite common in marching music. And a lot of the old ragtime music was also written in 2/4. So now 2/4 and 4/4 both have that back and forth bass drum, snare drum, bass drum, snare drum on alternating beats. So how can you tell the difference? And how I describe it is that 4/4 is a bit rounder. Think of this, if you're walking in 2/4, your walking is sort of like a 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Where in 4/4, it's a bit more fluid, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. They feel different, and the reason why is you don't just have strong and weak beats. There are variances within that. And in 4/4, your beat 1 is your strongest, and beat 3 is sort of in between, and then 2 and 4 are your lighter beats. But the flow comes from the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, these are subjective things I'm talking about. That's some tips to help you figure out what meter a song is in. So what you want to do, listen to the drums. Where's the bass drum? Where's the snare drum? Where do they fit within the beat? Then focus on the bass. The bass is going to be coming often on the downbeat. The chord changes generally happen on beat 1. They may last for 1 measure, 2 measures, 3 measures, 4 measures, but it's rare that you have the chords changing in the middle of a beat, especially in popular music. You may not get it right away, but that's okay. It's a fun exercise. In fact, I think it's great when you listen to a piece of music and just listen to just a part of it. Listen to what one instrument is doing and hear how that one instrument reflects and relates to all the other sounds that are going on. So just focus on the bass. Listen to the bass for a whole song, or just listen to the piano or the guitar part. Listen to just the snare drum. Hear how all of these things are locked together to make music really what music is. Okay, I'll be getting Daniel back in here next week. Until then, if there's anything you liked, if you have your own ways of hearing where the beats are in a song, write it in the comments below. And as always, like, subscribe, ring the bell. I'll see you next week. Bye. Hit the bell. Hit the bell, like and subscribe. That's it. We're done. This was done. Let's have lunch.